All right, on this week's episode, we have Joe Torville. Joe works at Blast Motion, so I'm sure you guys have seen some of these blast sensors. A lot of hitters put them on the end of their knob, and it tracks a lot of really cool metrics. We get into what those metrics mean in this episode, and Joe has done a lot of work with Prep Baseball Report over the last couple years, so he's been able to see what some of the best players in the country are doing from a metric standpoint. What are some of the metrics that they're getting? So pretty cool stuff. If you're into hitting and technology and just want to know what some of the best hitters in the world are doing and how they're utilizing Blast, check out this episode. All right, we now welcome on to the podcast, Joe Torville. Joe, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Patrick. I am excited to be on. Happy you invited me.
So I see you do, you work for Blast Motion. I see you're a writer though too. You do some different writing but it has nothing even to do with baseball when I was checking that out a little bit. Is that a passion of yours you like doing on the side, or do you ever see yourself getting I don't know, getting a book deal or something like that?
That's nice. I haven't been called a writer before in a long time, other than like just in the mirror. Yeah. No, yeah, I do. I do love writing. I've done it for a long time. I like literature. I like the complexity of literature. I like just exploring tough questions. And I think the cool thing I like about writing and literature itself is like there's never really a clear answer. Like, Dostoevsky doesn't really give you clear answers on things he like provides, but they amplify the problem. So
Hmm.
you're just like faced to confront it. And like a lot of that stuff can like carry over into baseball too, with like, for example, like intuition versus analytics. Like there's no clear answer which one should have the should go into the decision, but it amplifies the conversation, which is important. So yeah, it's like something I don't know about the book deal. I don't know if I'm that good of a writer. So I read too much Proust and like Ken Oscar to be a good writer. So
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
see you got a lot of
so
books behind you back there.
yeah, I don't have and that's just laziness. Ever since we moved to Philly like a year ago, I haven't had a bookshelf, and my books had to go somewhere, so that's in a corner behind my desk. Yeah,
So you've been working at Blast Motion now for 4 years. Before that,
yeah,
you were with Area Code Games. So it seems that you're really have a lot of knowledge and I'd say like the amateur baseball space, like travel baseball, high school players. And then I think one of the things that you had mentioned is you do a lot of work with PBR, Prep Baseball Report, helping them set up, maybe their systems and dealing with their data and how to interpret their data. But like, take us through a little bit on what exactly your current role is with PBR. I think that'd be interesting because we have a lot of players who listen to this, high school coaches, parents, and then some college coaches too. But what exactly do you do with PBR and help them with blast motion?
yeah. So we've been at PBR. I think just about the same time I've been at Blast actually, because a big part of me coming over to Blast was we were getting into the showcase side of the business. I had a lot of experience on that side. So yeah, I think it's a little under 4 years with PBR. Basically, they capture a big thing PBR kind of jumped on was they saw an opportunity with the showcases in like the amateur baseball space for like data collection and just like distributing information. And that was something they really focused on was like distribution of their information in the showcases, where like maybe other showcase companies like would collect a lot of information during their events, but were really bad at like distributing it. So like PBR figured out a pretty good way to distribute all this information through like those player profiles on their website or through like APIs and stuff like that. So and one thing they really wanted to get because like what they collect had a lot to do with the conversations with like recruiting coordinators or like scouts. So one of the things that kept coming up was blast motion. So we had an agreement with them, and basically what they do is capture blast at pretty much all of their events, pretty much in BP. And my role with them was getting them kind of onboarded and kind of like a consultant almost in the data collection itself, which is for me something I've learned with like some of the scouts and the front office staff when I was at Area Code when I got to hang out with those guys was just making sure the data is like consistent and reliable. So PPR will only capture like at batting at BP. It's usually around the same number of swings, like 20. We shoot for 30, but sometimes it's around like 20, depending on the time limit of the event as well. And basically, what we do is every single day. I have I have two interns, Giancarlo and Tyler, who, I had that depend on heavily. And basically every day PBR sends us in all their events they're running with the rosters of all those events. We upload those events through the Blast Connect, and so it's in the Blast app as well for them with all the players. And then when the scouting directors, the PBR scouting directors show up to their event, they open up their phone or their iPad and open up the app, and the events in there of all the players, and then those guys are just collecting. Um, simplicity is kind of luxury in that whole process. We don't complicate it a whole lot. We just make sure the swings are consistent with them and they're easy to analyze. So I'm not looking at a flip swing or a T swing and a BP swing. They're all just like consistent BP swings with, and it's an emphasis on players taking high intent swings too. So yeah, that's pretty much the process in a
So
nutshell.
for someone out there listening, like why is it important that people know blast metrics? Like how does knowing their blast metrics help them increase their chances of playing at the next level?
Well, it's like I mean, it's two parts to that question. One, it's kind of like getting a snapshot of what your swing looks like. And there's definitely different metrics, I'm sure we'll talk about, that correlate to success, both in the short term and the long term. And it's really important for players to be able to quantify that so they know what their swing is doing. Because sometimes what I feel like I'm doing is not what I'm doing, as you probably know, you're
Hmm.
a hitting coach.
Hmm.
I would probably say he's getting his bat back and he's not. But another reason too is like recruiting coordinators and scouts are looking at these metrics. And I wouldn't say they're making a decision on a kid based on these different metrics, whether it's ball flight or blast. Um, but they are using them to get an idea of what kind of player they're getting. So what they would have to do with that player once they're in their organization. And a player knowing that himself is, I think, more advantageous than kind of just like flying in blind, I would say.
What's the most important metric that you've seen? Like if you had to pick one metric that like, man, like this is the end all be all compared to all the other metrics when it comes to evaluating a player, like is it going to be bat speed for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated question. I'm not big on like listing them or which one's the most important, but like, yeah, bat speed is short term and short term for sure. Like bat speed equates success. Like that's just something I've seen across the board. At the amateur level, like the guys with the highest bat speed tend to have the most success. I've seen that with like a lot of swings, all the swings in our database I look at, and I go look at the player's performance, and it does correlate. At the pro level, I would say like bat speed is more of a prerequisite, but there's a certain level at minor league baseball where everyone has this kind of high bat speed, and rotational acceleration has been kind of that difference maker,
Hmm.
which is like how quickly you get into your bat speed. So if you can get into your bat speed quickly, you can make later
What do
decisions
you
at the
mean by
plate.
get into your bat speed?
So that a good analogy, we usually use like two cars. A good car one car is like a Honda, and the other car is like, I don't know, a Corvette. They both can go 65 miles per hour, but the Corvette's going to get to 65 a lot quicker. So that Corvette has chance. And same thing with the bat. Like the bat that can get into its peak speed quicker, doesn't take a lot of time to get into that speed. Is going to have like a more that players be more is going to be have a more advantageous opportunities at the plate because they can make decisions later. And when you can make decisions later, you're less vulnerable to pitchers that like, well, nowadays have like multiple, like three pitches, like 360 grade pitches that they can locate that are coming out in the same tunnel. Where if a pitcher is kind of just bat speed dependent and doesn't have that quickness, doesn't have that rotational acceleration, that player like can very well be like the best player in high school ball, college ball, even low parts of minor league baseball. But once they get to like high A and double A, and now you're facing pitchers who guys who do have like 3++ type pitches, they kind of turn into a different hitter. Like the swing and miss rates kind of go up. Yeah, the strikeouts go up as well. They get a little more overwhelmed with the plate. The contact though, we've seen like there is like a certain level of bat speed that does compensate for low rotational acceleration. But more in terms of like production, like their batting average of balls in play is good because like when they do make contact, it's still hard because they're still swinging the bat fast. The swing and miss rate is still there. So then it's kind of like it's you're kind of making a decision like, yeah, this guy's a high bat speed guy. The bat's not super quick, but he swings about like 77 miles per hour. Like when he makes contact, it's gonna have production. So that's when you have to like kind of like bucket certain guys. But yeah.
So for rotational acceleration, it's how quickly you can get the bat moving, how quickly your bat speed is, all that stuff.
Mhm.
But can't you manipulate that? Like for example, if you have a player who has a hand pump, because the sensor is going off of first movement, and so if your first move is like a hand pump straight down, where that set is going to set the sensor off, in theory, your rotational acceleration is going to be a little bit faster than somebody with like a traditional swing. No.
Well, I mean, you could technically. I mean, that's not. I don't know if that's a great way to manipulate rotational acceleration. A
Mm-hmm.
better way to manipulate would be like the arm bar out, and then like your body is just moving the bat instead of your hands and arms. But the problem with like trying to manipulate metrics is usually like you're not going to have a lot of success at the plate, and the goal is to hit the ball hard and far. So if like your goal is like to manipulate a blast metric while you're hitting, you're probably not going to be very
Well, when I
successful at the
say, I
plate.
guess maybe that's a bad question or a bad phrase. When I say manipulate, I don't mean like you're just doing something solely to get a better metric. I'm saying that, maybe the player, the way his swing is or the way his gather is or something, it sets the sensor off. And so it may correlate to a high score, but in reality, that's just because he set the sensor off in a previous move, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the sensor doesn't start collecting until it's the first downswing. So like this hand pump, the sensor wouldn't like capture that moment for rotational acceleration. It's that first forward downswing, pretty much when your elbow gets slotted back here, and then it's capture of like a 500, so like 500 hertz, like 14 different phases that angle. I mean, it's super technical, but that's when it captures. So a hand pump wouldn't really set that off. That would maybe set off like no, I actually wouldn't set off anything at all because this first movement is when we're capturing. So that's early connection, that's rotational acceleration. So the hand pump wouldn't really capture that at all.
How does it know? How does it know like to not capture anything until?
Just very advanced algorithms and testing millions of swings. Yeah.
Okay. What
And there's
about
like
let's go into
speedometers
some
in there as
other one.
well.
What's that? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, there's also like other parts in the sensor as well, like I guess speedometer and everything like that. But
Let's talk about a couple of the other metrics. I think like one would be early connection. Um, can you explain that one? Like why that one could be beneficial for players? I got a couple questions on that one, but I want to hear what you have to say in terms of like what exactly it means.
well, the definition of early connection is the angle of the bat at the start of the downswing in relation to the body or the body tilt.
Yeah.
Um, the advantageous thing I mean, the goal is to be as close to 90 degrees as possible. Very difficult thing to do over time. But we also have seen, we've seen guys with pretty high, like early connection, which isn't like the most advantageous, but what they do is like their variance is pretty low. So it's like 20-degree variance or so.
Mhm.
We've actually seen a lot of guys be pretty successful with that because when you're looking at early connection, you just want to find something repeatable because it shows like it's a pretty low maintenance swing. It's a repeatable start of the swing. So the guy's probably starting from a very similar place. But that's pretty much and it usually does equate into on plane efficiency too. Like the better the early connection or the more consistent the early connection is, the better the on plane efficiency metrics are. But yeah,
That's just bat angle at the start of the swing, correct?
on that first down movement. Yeah, like that.
Okay. And then I think it read too, it somehow, how does it take into consideration like your body angle, like your upper body tilt angle? Like I read that's one of the definitions as part of it. Like how would it know what angle your upper body is tilted at?
I mean, same thing with how we measure rotational acceleration, just millions of testing and high algorithms and mechanics inside the sensor. But it's to measure like high intent swings. So like I wouldn't go up there and like lean back and like I've seen people like trying to like lean back and like try and like mess up the early on plane or the early connection and on plane efficiency metrics. So yeah, like we can get like Kyle Addo's probably a better person to ask that question because he's on the technical side,
Yeah.
but we can get a pretty good idea of like what your body is doing based on what the bat is doing in relation.
How should coaches, like, let's just say, like, coaches in high school or college, like, what do you think the best way for them to utilize blast motion is? Like, if you were a high school coach or a college coach or ran a travel team or something like that, like, how would you utilize it in order to help the most amount of players and improve their game, develop them as hitters?
I mean, it depends on the season, I guess. But I mean, the lowest hanging fruit is always going to be bat speed. Um, that's just something I've even had to. I used to talk about bat speed kind of passively. Like I was never like super convinced that was like the most important thing. In the past, I thought it was like you just need a certain amount of bat speed to be better.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm like more convinced than ever now in the past year or so that like the lowest thing it doesn't matter what your bat path is or what your swing is or what level you're on. Like an increase of bat speed is going to help you. So that's like the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, if I just, I don't, I mean, it depends on like the team budget, but like if I'm a high school coach or a college coach, like the two things I definitely want are like a blast motion sensor and like some sort of weighted bat program, like the axe bat weighted bat program, like Driveline. Um, and then, I mean, from there, especially when you as a coach and you're dealing with like so many players, I think monitoring that bat speed, setting goals for those players, and then from there, you're really just focusing on like a good approach to the plate and just being students of the game and being students of like watching the other pitcher, stuff like that, and preparation. So I think preparation and approach plus like increase in bat speed, I think overall is a pretty solid plan to go into a season fall, and because you can do it all year round the bat speed training program. So yeah, I know people usually want to give like more complex answers to that, and I've even like tried to find like more complex or like uh clever answers, but I'm just now more convinced that increasing your bat speed and just like focusing on approach is probably good for like an amateur team.
You said in the past year, you're now like more convinced than ever that, how important bat speed is. Like what happened in this past year versus the previous 3 years you've been at Blast Motion that made you now convinced that bat speed is like, the number one thing and the number one metric for Blast.
Well, I wouldn't say it's like number one metric for Blast, but like it is something that you should be focused on. I guess, yeah, I guess it's number one metric for Blast, whatever. I mean, I would say rotational acceleration is the most number one metric for Blast, but
Really? You think so?
that, yeah, for sure. I mean, it depends what your goals are. Is your goal? I think like everyone is taking this game serious, like wants to play professional baseball and wants to contribute to a major league organization. And what we've seen is like there's a huge rotational acceleration has been a huge separator by the time you get to double A or high A. But the issues with that, I know we're getting off topic, but the issues with that is like it's like super difficult to improve your rotational acceleration, mainly because a low rotational acceleration score has something to do with like a movement. It's usually a movement issue, not a swing problem. Um, and to fix that, you first have to ID that issue, which is usually like a shoulder thing or like a hip thing. Um, and then you probably have to do a bunch of physical therapy to figure out to correct that move. And then you have to do a strength program to like increase the muscles around that movement so you can make the adjustment you need to make. And then you make the adjustment. And then once you make that try and make that adjustment, you're talking about like hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours in the cage,
Hmm.
trying to relearn a new movement that the other movement you've been doing your whole career, maybe for like 17 years. And then even when you do kind of figure it out, our brains are so defensive that when you get into a game, like your brain and your body just want to go back to the old movement real fast and want to go back to like what's familiar. So I think a lot of times, like I think coaches and players at the professional level or even at the high end amateur level, when they look at like, should we improve our rotational acceleration or should we improve bat speed? And I think like when you look at the journey you have to go on to improve rotational acceleration, it's like it's pretty risky. Like it's a long journey and it might not pay off. And while you do it, you might lose something else in your swing. Like you might lose bat speed, or you might lose your occupancy, or your swing path, I should say, whatever. So I think the that's why like the bat speed, I say like bat speed's the lowest hanging fruit. Like I just think, yeah, bat speed is the lowest hanging fruit. Like that's the one you probably want to train for. I've seen rotational acceleration be the separator. However, like the reason why you also want to focus on bat speed, because like once you get above like if your average bat speed is above like 75 miles per hour in game, like that can compensate for low, as I said earlier, to the low RA values. So yeah, it's a complicated answer, and it really depends on the player and the coach and the resources that coach and player have around them, really.
If I wanted to increase my bat speed, though, like, couldn't I just use a lighter bat?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm just gonna quote. I don't know. I can't quote a study I read on this, but like, I don't believe even using a lighter bat really increases your bat speed in game. I think the only thing that increases your bat speed in game is the training over time, because it's got to be transferable to in game. But like bat speed training, I even believe like if it's like more than what 20%, if you're using a heavy bat to train with, and lower than 20% of your like of your actual bat weight, it really doesn't pay off. So it's a very specific type of like range with the bats you want to train with. But yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I mean,
pretty sure
I've done
I've seen a
some
study on that.
research on that. And like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I've also seen there's also been studies done though on the over and underload that are significantly more heavier overload that has still increased bat speed, and the same thing with underload using fungos and things like that that are way lighter. I think for me, I think I would prefer like kind of that 10 to 20% just because I think anytime you have players who don't really understand their swing quite yet, they're still growing their body, they can get into some bad habits. I think when they're swinging like really heavy objects consistently and things like that. But the studies that I've done, and I've written about it on for the Hitting Chronicle, it shows that actually there has been significant increase for players who have done the overload training, like within that 10 to 20%, but also more than that too, and and under that as well, like using fungos and 50-ounce bats, things like that too. So I've seen it both ways.
Yeah, no, totally. Were they measuring? Can you send me that too? Were they measuring like in-game bat speed, or were they measuring like controlled in a cage type bat speed?
I believe it was for these. It was in a practice setting.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's another good question though. That I wanted to ask is in game versus practice. Like, what have you seen? Is it normal for some of the metrics to get a little bit worse or a little bit better in game versus in practice?
It varies. I think, I mean, the best players tend to have the same metrics in practice slash showcase and in game. I mean, the biggest differences, I mean, we did this a study on area code a couple years ago where we compared like the batting practice data to like the in-game data because we capture both at the area code games. And there's usually like a 10-mile-per-hour increase in bat speed in the batting practice compared to in-game sometimes. But the best players had it more similar. Definitely, and we've definitely seen that in the showcase level, especially PBR. Guys tend to have like 10 miles per hour, sometimes like 12 miles per hour increase in bat speed than they were in games. And the reason for that is because you have to also remember, like when you get a bat speed rating off blast, a big part of that is like where they make contact. So if you make contact like deeper in the zone, the reading itself is going to be less than what maybe would have been if it was out, if the guy caught it out in front. And so like in batting practice and like showcase settings, a lot of these kids are catching the ball like super out in front and like they're really selling out. Like they're trying to show off like their raw power. So like the farther the bat has to travel, the more it has time like to speed up. So that's another thing too. Like you don't want to like pin a kid to a certain bat speed metric. Like you kind of that's why looking at averages is so important and looking at the peaks. Because where that player makes contact is gonna also like the it's gonna also play a part in like what that reading is on the Blast Motion app. So you kind of have to like paint that picture a little bit. So like one kid in batting practice, who's swinging to that 77 miles per hour, but in game it was like 68 or 70, but he hit the ball like deeper in the zone. He went the other way with it. It might have been like the same bat speed, but like he hit the ball deeper in the zone. But yeah, there usually is a pretty big difference in the game. I mean, it depends in practice. It depends on what the setting is. Like if it's very competitive and high intense, off the machine or live pitching or whatever, it should be pretty similar. But yeah, for the
Yeah,
most
I
part, we've
actually
seen
have. I've
this.
seen that too. I've had a player who I saw was at a PBR event and was in the 80s or high
Yeah,
70s, even like at right around 80-mile-an-hour bat speed, and I had him mid 60s.
Yeah,
when he was training in my cage, and I was like, "Whoa, that's a little bit different," you know? So, I mean,
yeah.
to your
We
point.
see a lot of that. A lot. I mean, it's like I'd say like 98% of those kids have a huge increase in their bat speed at any showcase. And we see that with area code. We see that with PBR. And I think, PBR does a really good job like putting players in like a very advantageous position. So like they have BP throwers who are throwing the ball in a way that lets the kids like really show off like their movements and everything, and they catch the ball way out in front. And these kids are super amped up. So we do see a lot of that, but that's still good data to look at. You just have to understand the context of that data. If a kid is capable of swinging the bat in the 80s at any point, that's probably something to take note of. That there's something in the tank that it can do that.
And would you say that's a reason that maybe there's high school kids out there who have faster bat speeds than guys in the major leagues?
Say that again.
So I mean, there's definitely high school players out there who have faster bat speed than hitters in the big leagues. Like, would you say that's one of the reasons why is just contact point simply?
I mean, if we're looking at the values, if you're comparing them, yeah, if we're looking at the values, yeah, contact point, setting, like all these things are really important. Um, a lot of like a lot of the bat speed metrics we have on MLB guys are either from the Hawkeye, which is in game, or through us, which I can't like share specifics, but on average, it's 72, it's usually around 72 miles per hour, the higher end around the 80s as well. So yeah.
Is there too much bat speed? Can you get to a point where you're hurting yourself? Your
I
swing is in
don't
and out of the
know.
zone too quickly.
Well, that's more of a preparation issue. I wouldn't say it's a bat speed issue. I don't think increasing bat speed would ever hurt a player. Maybe like too much intent and shoot, not too much intent, but like swinging out of their shoes.
Mhm.
I do think like intent needs to be practiced. When a player first like, so I have like talked to players before. It's like, I really want to increase my bat speed. What should I do? I was like, have you tried swinging the bat harder? And they're like, I guess not. So it's but so like intent, and then like they go up there and like they do try and swing the bat harder, but it's a different like feel and different environment. And that's something you have to practice. I think you have to practice like high intense swings, and you got to be prepared for the pitching you're facing. But I don't think, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen higher bat speed hurt a player. I've seen other things hurt a player, like approach or the swing path is messed up or eyesight. I've seen eyesight be an issue as well. But yeah, not bat speed.
Have you tested? You said eyesight. I mean, are you guys getting into that stuff now next for sensors?
No, no, but just case studies from like MLB teams. Like, so there's actually two. I have a pretty good one. There was one with, I want to say, yeah, it was like the Brewers. They drafted a kid who had really good metrics all around. Blast metrics were phenomenal. He was like, 75 miles an hour, bat speed on average. And it was like that in game MVP. His rotational acceleration was like 26 Gs. On plane efficiency was like 78%. Really good stuff. His ball flight metrics in BP were really good too. Hit the ball like above 100 miles per hour consistently, all over the field, sprayed it. In the games, kid stunk. No one knew why. He was just like really bad in games. But they later found out that like his eyesight was like awful. So they drafted him a little later than they should have. Or then he probably should have been like a second round. I think they got him like in the seventh round. Fixed his eyes, and then I believe he did really well. I think he's still playing too. But yeah, I don't remember. I pictured the kid's face. I don't remember his name. But the other one is recent. You can Baseball America actually wrote about it. Austin Chanel with the Angels. He has phenomenal blast motion metrics across the board, and I was actually really excited about following him going into Cape Cod last season because he was at FAU. He just kind of piqued my interest, and he was kind of like fringy at Cape Cod. He wasn't great. He wasn't really good. And he has metrics that usually tend. He had metrics for a player that tend to separate themselves, and he didn't do that. But I found out later. I think it was like his left eye, or it was his right eye. Actually, it was like lead right eye. I think he's a lefty. They fixed that, and then he stroked. His swing and misses went down. His strikeouts went down. His walks went up. And then we saw what he did this year. He got drafted a couple months ago in July. He's already in the big leagues. I think he went like a 13 game hit streak or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, stuff like that. That's the cool thing about blast. Like it's a part of the process, not the whole process of the hitter, but it's a very important part. The bat's moving correctly and the kid's still not hitting. It gives you that, it gives you that ability to like, okay, I don't think it's his swing. It might be something else. His approach might be crap. It might be his eyesight. Kid might be stressed. He might not even be getting good sleep. Maybe he has a crappy mattress. I've heard that one before too, believe it or not. Yeah, I've heard them all. I've heard all these things, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you just said there about it. It's a tool. I think it's a tool that's has some really good use for sure. I mean, just from even just an evaluation standpoint, I think for even just teaching players like their swing, I think sometimes putting numbers that can really help them understand what they're doing, what they need to do better. Um, I think you kind of you sometimes have there's a fine line between like training for the bat speed, because I see one of the things that I see is so many kids in this the showcase setting is a great example of this. So they just get in there and they're just trying to pull everything, right? And so it's like, you
Hmm.
start doing bat speed training stuff, and now they're focused on swinging hard and this and that, but we're losing sight of becoming a better hitter in a lot of times. And so I think from what I've seen, doing some of the bat speed training stuff, it can be beneficial if you're solely just doing that and not necessarily mixing it in at the same time with actually practicing, whether it be like within your team or whatnot, more of on the side. But I think the biggest thing is honestly the weight room to help increase the bat speed more than anything else. That's just what I've seen. I think hitting it's an art, it's a science too, but I would say it's more of an art. And I don't know, that's just something that I've seen. Do you work with any hitters at all?
Like virtually, I keep in touch with a lot of guys. Like, yeah, but not I'm not physically with them. But I will say, going back to your point, yeah, I don't. The focus probably shouldn't be on like just the bat speed. Like the bat speed is like a preparation thing for the game. Like the goal is to get hits, and I'm more of like you got to have external goals. Like you definitely trying to hit the ball up the middle or hit the ball in the air hard and letting the body kind of self-correct itself. Like I'm a big fan of putting players in tough environments where they have to self-correct and like the coach is not talking as much and just like putting a player in a position where like if you can't hit a high fastball, like give them a bunch of high fastballs to hit off the machine and like make them figure it out. And then using blast is a good way to like look at that process. Like a player wants to check on something real fast while he's trying to self-correct that issue he has. Blast is like a really good way to do that for coaches and players. And a lot of times like it needs to be with the coach, and the coach needs to communicate that to the players. Um, Blast, the whole point of using Blast is making sure you have the tools, like the physical tools to swing the bat well so you can be a complete hitter at the plate. I wouldn't put like, not everything's going to go in the bat speed. As I mentioned earlier, like approach is a very important thing. Like having a game plan is very important. Being a student of the game is very important. The weight room is really important. Flexibility is really important. Sleep is, and so is eating right. Um, but you do need bat speed, and like we've seen that, like having blast motion is a good way to help with that. To monitor it.
I also think from a coaching standpoint too, I think it's helpful. I mean, you start working with so many guys. I think it's helpful to help utilize technology to uh, just kind of give you some objective information, and it's so easy to at times even miss stuff. I don't care who you are. And so it's nice to be able to have some numbers and some metrics and things like that to be able to consistently just look at, just to like, even if it's just looking over when you're like evaluating a hitter or a player, because you can lose sight of stuff pretty easily. And so you see maybe that red shows up and you're like, all right, let me look into this. It may not be end up being anything, but it's nice to kind of have that I don't know, call it like an assistant, I guess, if you will, to be able to kind of keep you accountable as a coach.
Yeah, I mean a big thing. I mean we use an analogy too. Like blast motion is pretty similar. It's like the weather app. Like the weather app tells you like the temperature, but there's nothing on the weather app that tells you to put a jacket on or to wear like long pants or thick socks. You have to make the decision as a human. And the weather app helps you make pretty good decisions on what to wear each day. And Blast Motion is a really good resource to help those coaches make decisions on what they need to do with those players and quantify certain things as well.
You guys, I assume, utilize it a little bit with some of the other pieces of technology out there, like K Motion, K Vest, things like that. Is that something that um, you do specifically?
Do we use it together? I mean, teams use them together and coaches do use them together for sure.
I wasn't sure at
Because
PBR
I
if you
think
guys if that was like a part of at the same time there.
no,
No.
no, because the big thing is like KVS KVS, I mean, it's pretty tough operationally to go through like 40 hitters, throw a KVS on and off, and then on and on. That's a time consuming thing. Um, KVS is probably better suited for, like training, like one-on-one type training, testing. Actually, yeah, training, testing type stuff. But in a showcase setting, you got to go in and out. You got scouts in the stands, you got college recruiters in the stands, and they got to catch a flight or they want to go eat lunch. So using blast and TrackMan is just a little more advantageous thing to use in that setting.
What's the deal with using the blast and putting it within the actual bat? Like that's something I've seen a couple years ago. Is that on the bat companies for not getting on board? Or how is that like how can we make it easier to just like stick that blast sensor in the bat and not have to worry about it coming out again?
Oh, you mean like a smart bat? Like it's like, I mean, we have like bats where you can put the blast sensor in, like some wooden bat companies that do it. Rawlings has it with their metal bats, but you got to twist it in and out. Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, I guess one of like my experience, it's been a pain of just like them actually staying in the actual bat, like it coming out pretty easy. I didn't know if that was on the bat
Oh,
companies. Have you seen that?
yeah, I've heard. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm not really in that world with the manufacturing world. That's more like a business development thing.
Yeah.
I'm more of like I interpret data and then I help PBR capture blast data. So I'm not sure if that is an issue. It's not something I'm personally aware of, but if it is, I'm sure someone at Blast is
Yeah,
aware
no,
of
I
it.
was just curious for in the future. I think they'd be pretty cool if like the majority of the bat manufacturers out there like had that as an option for when kids go and buy bats and things like that. Like they would have, be able to do that, with their regular bats anyway, no matter the brand. So that was just
You mean
me personally.
like the sensors like in the like permanently inside the knob? Is that what you
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess the only obstacle there would be like charging the sensor. I guess you'd have to charge the bat.
Yeah, you could have like a
Yeah.
charging stand where you put the bat on.
Yeah, exactly. That's a pretty good idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
kind
that'd
of
be pretty
cool.
slick. I mean, but what are some of the other, I mean, what are some of the other metrics that you like personally for Blast when you're, evaluating a hitter or just looking at like, are there any other ones that you like? I'm sure they all have value, but I just wasn't sure if there
Mhm.
was a couple that we haven't talked about that you do like or look into.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely spend as an evaluation.
Yeah.
It's two phrases, there's coach eval and there's like scout eval. Scout eval, I'm always looking at bat speed and rotational acceleration. Um, Obviously, from there, I'll peek at on-plane efficiency. I don't write players off if they don't have great on-plane efficiency right away because that is something that can be adjusted with like good hitting coaches like yourself or in a different MLB organization or college organization. Um, but I like right now I'm going through gave myself a little project. I've been going through like the top 20 OPS, home runs, and hits guys and
Mhm.
like the different levels of minor league baseball and major league baseball. And I'm not done yet, so I don't have a conclusion. But the one thing I keep seeing is a lot of guys with above 70% on plane efficiency in those categories. Like those top 20 guys in OPS, top 20 guys in home runs, top 20 guys in hits. I was doing the Pacific League, internationally, the AAA guys, and I think the average on plane efficiency was like 75%. So that's, I mean, and then what I'm probably going to do is go back and look what those guys' numbers look like when they're like amateurs or low minors and see how much that's improved over the years. So yeah, those three metrics like bat speed, rotational acceleration, and on plane efficiency from like a scout evaluation point, those are three I spend like most of my time on. As a coach evaluation, bat speed course, we're going to look at that first. We already discussed that. Um, I'm looking at rotational acceleration because I want like a good idea of what it looks like. Again, this depends on the level. I'm right now looking at this as a college coach perspective, if anyone's wondering. Um, Again, I want an idea of what the rotational acceleration looks like. But I'm going to spend most of my time on bat speed, early connection, and then based on early connection, that's probably going to feed into on-plane efficiency. So if I was grouping hitters to go work on different things throughout the week, it would be like a bat speed session and then some sort of constraint drill for like early connection. Um, and then of course you have to do like, we have to have a get well-rounded assessment. Like you're probably going to do some ball flight metrics as well. with like how hard they're hitting the ball, like what their peak exit velocity is and their average exit velocity. And then based off how hard they're hitting it and what their bat speed looks like, you know, if you're gonna get into the weeds of like, having an external cue for like what kind of launch angle you want with a hitter, that's really gonna depend on how hard the guy hits the ball. If his peak exit velocity is like 85 miles per hour, I don't know if I want that kid focusing on like a 20-degree launch angle, maybe something a little more straightforward. So yeah, I mean, it is an art, like you say. Like this is an art. That's one thing I have learned over the years. This science of blast motion metric is definitely an art. Um, but yeah, I think that again, like the lowest hanging fruit, bat speed, early connection, all playing efficiency. If like I'm a college coach, if I'm a high school coach with like a lot less resources, a lot of these kids probably play like 4 different sports. Maybe don't get them all year round. I do think, I mean, and say like you're in an area of the country where there's not like a ton of great hitting coaches like yourself, like in Cincinnati or whatever. Maybe you're in Maine, where I'm from, and there's not like a ton of expert hitting coaches out there.
There's not a ton of
I just
anything
think
up there.
pride. Yeah,
I'm kidding.
confidence,
I'm
and
kidding.
good
I've been
fit,
to Maine.
good
It's
good lobstering.
beautiful in the summertime. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah, no, I love it. It's one of my favorite places. But yeah, if you're in a resource, it's like 98% of high school baseball coaches don't have a ton of resources, and the kids don't have the resources around the kids are off that program too, to go to other people. So again, like I'm probably just gonna have them all try and get stronger in the weight room and do bat speed training programs, and then try and clean up their swings with like early connection type stuff. But again, it's going to be depending on the budget you have, amount of resources you have around you. But yeah, so I do because I always like feel for those coaches that are in those areas of the country that don't have all those resources, and they get told by they watch things online, or they watch like the blast stuff, like, and they're trying to do 12 metrics, and they're trying to pound 12 metrics into these kids, whether it's like ball flight metrics or blast metrics or whatever, and it's just not feasible. So I think you have to really go for the lowest hanging fruit when you have like that type of high school coach with these players, and it is a bat speed stuff, and then just kind of cleaning up the bad path with like early connection. But yeah,
Awesome. Joe, appreciate you coming on it, man. Been a lot of fun.
yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I'll have to come on again.
I'll put all your contact info in the show notes, and then if someone wants to see some of your writing too, I'll put that in there as well. I think that'd be pretty cool. Like I said, I know it has nothing to do with baseball, but I think that a lot of that stuff can correlate to baseball. Some of those things that you need to learn for sure.
100%. I mean, yeah. I mean, I look at everything. I'm like, how can this apply to baseball? So
Yeah.
yeah, or how does it not apply to hitting? It's pretty fun. But yeah, no, I'm gonna do a lot more writing. I'm gonna do like my baseball writing just on Twitter. That's what I've decided, that
Okay.
Twitter is gonna be like my baseball writing page. So I'm gonna do a lot of brain dumps, and if it's kind of all over the place, it's because I read too much Nasgard and Proust that night, if anyone's wondering. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm sure we'll engage. I'm sure us two will engage a lot
Oh
more
yeah, for
on
sure,
Twitter
man.
as well.